The Philippine Coast Guard published video on the recent peaceful and successful resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal to counter misrepresentation made by the Chinese foreign minister saying that the Philippines seek prior approval from Chinese government. These videos support the National Task Force for West Philippine Sea statement that the Chinese vessels maintained their distance and did not disrupt the resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. These videos further reinforce the statements made by the Department of Foreign Affairs that the Philippines did not and will not seek permission from the PRC for such missions. The videos clearly show that there was no boarding or inspection by the Chinese Coast Guard, contradicting the claims made by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. The video also confirmed the presence of Chinese maritime forces were present in the area, including 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels, 3 People's Liberation Army Navy vessels, and 2 Chinese maritime militia vessels, which maintained their distance and did not disrupt the resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal.
Wala tayong dahilan para maghingi ng permiso sa Chinese government in doing this resupply operation. Ulitin ko, the videos that we presented showed na ang China ay malayo mula sa dinaanan ng Philippine Coast Guard at ng mga resupply boats natin na ginamit. And at the same time, wala naman tayong na-experience na sasabihin nilang iboboard. At most importantly, hindi natin sila papayagan na inspekin ang karga ng ating resupply boat.
On July 27th, the Armed Forces of the Philippines with the support of the Philippine Coast Guard successfully carried out a rotation and resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal inside the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. The AFP used the civilian vessel ML Lapu-Lapu, which was escorted by the PCG vessel BRP Cape Engaño. During the operation, various Chinese maritime forces were observed in the vicinity, including 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels, 3 People's Liberation Army Navy vessels, and 2 Chinese maritime militia vessels. During the entire duration of the mission, the Chinese vessels maintained their distance and did not undertake any action to disrupt the rotation and resupply mission. The successful execution of the resupply mission allowed the AFP to deliver essential supplies and provisions to the station personnel on the BRP Sierra Madre, while also rotating them with newly deployed troops. The Philippine government recognize and commend the professionalism exhibited by the men and women of the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard throughout the execution of mission. Their dedication, competence, and unwavering commitment to their duties have contributed to the successful outcome of the operation. The Philippines agreed to the provisional understanding with China over the resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal, for the simple reason of de-escalating tensions and preventing misunderstanding and miscalculations at sea. The understanding explicitly does not prejudice the national position of the Philippines. The guidance of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is clear. The Philippines is committed to the cause of peace, but it will not be deterred nor it will yield. The Philippines, nonetheless, committed to address and manage difficult issues through dialogue and diplomacy. Manila fully expect Beijing to adhere to the provisions of the provisional understanding. Both sides should deal with differences in a constructive manner and never through coercion and intimidation. To clarify, the Philippines did not and will never seek permission from the People's Republic of China to conduct resupply missions to Ayungin Shoal. There was also no boarding and inspection by the Chinese Coast Guard as claimed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry in its statement earlier. Notwithstanding the provisional understanding with the People's Republic of China, the position of the Philippines is steadfast, unwavering, and has not changed. Ayungin Shoal is a low-tide elevation not subject to sovereignty claims by the China as ruled by the Arbitral Tribunal in its 2016 award. It falls within the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf of the Philippines. Therefore, Manila's continued presence and activities at the said shoal is lawful and legitimate as it is in accordance with international law, particularly UNCLOS. The National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea remains steadfast in its commitment to safeguarding their sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the disputed waters. The Philippines will continue to exercise and assert their maritime rights, now and in the future.
Hey, go away! Go away! Go away! Go back to China!
Another China's distorted claims happened early this month during the Armed Forces of the Philippines and Philippine Coast Guard's successful conduct of medical evacuation amidst Chinese Coast Guard interference. The Armed Forces of the Philippines, together with the Philippine Coast Guard, successfully carried out the emergency medical evacuation of a Philippine Navy personnel stationed at BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal on the 7th of July 2024. The PCG swiftly deployed their vessels, BRP Cobra and BRP Cape Engaño, to rendezvous with the rigid-hull inflatable boat in the vicinity of Ayungin Shoal. The PCG faced numerous obstructing and delaying maneuvers by Chinese Coast Guard vessels, but they remained steadfast to their humanitarian mission and was able to complete the transfer of the sick personnel. Despite the threatening presence of various Chinese Coast Guard small vessels, the Philippine Coast Guard rigid-hull inflatable boat was able to return to the main PCG vessel without further interruption. The sick personnel were then provided with urgent medical attention. The successful execution of this operation is a testament to the unwavering bravery, dedication and professionalism of the AFP and PCG. Both institutions remain vigilant in their mission to protect and serve the Filipino people. As they continue to carry out their patriotic duties, they embody the true spirit of heroism in safeguarding Philippine sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. The claim made by the People's Republic of China that they have permitted a medical evacuation for a sick Navy personnel on July 7th, and the rotation and resupply mission on July 27th, is part of China's propaganda. In order to present themselves as humanitarian while asserting their authority to allow such operation to be carried out in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, is ridiculous and foremost a lie. The China Coast Guard tracked the Philippines' actions in accordance with the law, a CCG spokesperson said on Tuesday, noting that the Philippines deliberately misleads international understanding by ignoring facts and creating malicious speculation around the issue. This statement further confirms their illegal deployment of vessels within Philippines' EEZ and highlights their government's view that the preservation of human life and welfare requires approval. Evidently, the deployment of numerous boats to delay the medical evacuation for hours just shows that they have a low regard for a humanitarian mission. According to China's propaganda published by Global Times, at the request of the Philippines, the Chinese side allowed the Philippines to send a sick person from the illegally grounded warship on Ayungin Shoal based on humanitarian considerations on July 7. While the Chinese foreign minister spokesperson said, on July 27 the Philippines' conduct of peaceful and successful resupply mission is with prior approval from Beijing. Both statements are ridiculous and foremost a lie, as part of Chinese propaganda. In a separate incident, in the West Philippine Sea, China Coast Guard made no help to distressed Filipino fishers, and even blocked the Philippine Coast Guard who rescued the fishermen near Scarborough Shoal. China Coast Guard personnel blocked the efforts of the Philippine Coast Guard to rescue Filipino fishermen from an ill-fated boat at Panatag Shoal in the West Philippine Sea, according to PCG Commodore J. Terriella. The Philippine Coast Guard refuted China's earlier reports that the Chinese Coast Guard allowed the rescue to proceed after being informed of the humanitarian nature of the mission. During the rescue operation, the Chinese Coast Guard deployed 2 rigid-hull inflatable boats, not to assist the PCG, but to obstruct and hinder their efforts in rescuing the 2 injured Filipino fishermen, who suffered second-degree burns. The PCG and Filipino fishermen who were involved in the rescue efforts managed to outmaneuver the rigid-hull inflatable boats of Chinese Coast Guard, and successfully transfer the injured fishermen for immediate first aid. Terriella pointed out that China Coast Guard personnel on board the 2 RHIBs were already aware that the Philippine Coast Guard have already rescued and taken on board the 2 injured Filipino fishermen. But the Chinese Coast Guard still wanted to have much more optics, that they sent their 2 rubber boats with camera and drone to probably come up with propaganda materials that they are trying to rescue for humanitarian aid, visualizing they are a responsible state about the welfare of the injured Filipino fishermen. The effort was part of a massive maligned information campaign by China that aims to divide Filipinos on the issue of the West Philippine Sea, Terriella added. Despite the distress call from fishermen, the crew on board the Chinese Coast Guard vessel warned they would arrest all fishermen if the Philippine Coast Guard proceeded with the rescue. The incident was also confirmed by the victims. According to China's propaganda relating to the incident, the Chinese Coast Guard throw a life vest to the distressed fishermen as a sort of help. According to the fishermen, the vests thrown were actually useless to them. because they were already rescued and transferred to Philippine Coast Guard ship, BRP Sierra at the time China wanted to portray a help. In fact, they said, BRP Sierra was even shadowed by the Chinese Coast Guard ship after they are rescued and boarded to the Philippine Coast Guard ship. Philippines did not and will never ask permission from China regarding actions at Ayungin Shoal, and that the Philippines is loitering in Chinese waters is unfounded. Ayungin Shoal is within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, and as such, the Philippines does not need to seek permission from China for activities within its own EEZ. In fact, it is the Chinese vessels that are loitering in Philippine waters, violating international law and Philippine sovereignty. Chinese propaganda has been proliferating widely in the Philippines, targeting the Filipino people to spread false information in order to gain advantage in their territorial claims in the West Philippine Sea. This strategic dissemination is part of the broader effort to manipulate public perception and policy directions favorable to the interest of Chinese government hegemonic ambitions. Philippine officials have belied by slamming these claims, categorizing these as a calculated attempt to sow discord and divide Filipinos to undermine the nation's unity.
Anybody could say anything. Anybody could say anything. These stories will be rehashed. Today's battlefield is in the minds of the people. The cognitive domain is the ultimate battlefield. So we need to understand there will be very little force-on-force actions. This will be a battle of information, of narratives, of shaping the perception of the people. We will not dignify reports like that.
Wala tayong dahilan para maghingi ng permiso sa Chinese government in doing this supply operation. Ulitin ko, the videos that we presented showed na ang China ay malayo mula sa dinaanan ng Philippine Coast Guard at ng mga resupply boats natin na ginamit. And at the same time, wala naman tayong na-experience na sasabihin nilang iboboard. At most importantly, hindi natin sila papayagan na inspekin ang karga ng ating resupply boat.
This misinformation campaign is seen as deliberate tactic by China to facilitate divisiveness with the Filipino people, causing internal conflict that distract from China's aggressiveness and illegal occupation in the Philippine sovereignty. By stirring internal strife, the strategy aims to weaken Filipino resolve and divert attention from more aggressive maneuvers in contested territories. By focusing on verified information and providing a balanced view, it is clear that the Chinese government's claims are attempts to spread misinformation and alter the narrative to paint itself as a victim, whereas the Philippines is operating within its legal rights under international law.